The Protected Way, the Oasis Marian message, a way of life. This message and this vision is a very integrated aspect of life, inasmuch as it's trying to let people organize their own life within it in a way which is very realistic. The message and the vision are integrated into life because they're all about a way of life which is perfect. God has given life so that life can achieve perfection. He has no wish for life to deny its reality. He has no wish for life to minimize itself. He is the God who loves so deeply that he has given life out of love, so that it finally reaches a level of love which is perfect. Now this vision is explaining very clearly that God has wished this to happen in a very beautiful, simple, loving way. He has created human beings so that they live and love together very simply, very beautifully, very perfectly, understanding that he's giving them life out of love, so that they love with him and each other in a very perfect way. Now, fallen nature has distorted this vision, so that people are not even understanding that God wishes them to live life in this perfect way. They have some mistaken idea that this perfection cannot be achieved on earth. Yet Jesus very clearly, when he gave the perfect prayer, the Lord's Prayer, indicated that this perfection is absolutely achievable. And Mary, as God's mother, is trying to let people know through this Oasis vision that there is a way of life which can let people orientate to this perfection in a very beautiful, simple, balanced, ordered way. The Oasis way of life is a perfect way of life. Therefore, people who enter this way of life have to enter it in a very dedicated way, because they're aiming for perfection. They're aiming for a way of living which is so orientated to God's understanding of life that they are trying to move with each other into a perfect understanding of this. Mary, through this vision of the Oasis, has attempted to let people see that this way of life is really a very beautiful, peaceful, free way of life. Because she's explaining that people have really become enslaved within the world to a way of living which is not peaceful or happy or free. It is bowing them down with a materialism which is not letting them understand themselves. This materialism is trying to push people into a conformity, a uniformity, a leveling down of themselves, which makes them live in such a superficial way, a way which is very much linked with selfishness and materialism, and a perverted understanding of everything that is beautiful. Because Mary explains that the superficial way of looking at life is to see life in this distorted way, which makes money and possessions and physical attributes the criteria for well-being and happiness and an acknowledgement from other people which is acceptable. Now Mary explains that this really is putting people under such pressure because God has never intended people to live in this way. The way of life which Mary proposes through this Oasis Marian message is all about love. And it's all about a loving way of living, which is very real. Not a pretend way of living. Not a love which is theoretical. But a very deep and feeling way of living, which allows each individual to develop in this deep and feeling way. In order to do this, she says very clearly that people have to get rid of all the clutter of life which is weighing them down. And she knows that this is very difficult because people really do think that money is very important. She understands that money up to a point is necessary today. But she would also explain that if people live in a simple way, which is orientated to the way of life which she desires them to live, there is no need to make money a preoccupation, because if people are working together in a very simple way, a very loving way, a very love-orientated way, then they will be helping each other to maintain stability. And she really does explain that in the future, this understanding of economy, this working together to provide each other with the basic necessities of life, in terms of food and clothing and shelter, livelihood and well-being, will be the pattern which God will enter into in a supernatural way to produce for these people a new energy so that they can use it. People who are not living their life within this pattern will be unable to adapt to this energy. They will be unable to attune to this energy, will be unable to use this energy, because this energy will be God's power offered in a totally pure way as light. Mary explains that people who are using the pattern of life which she describes will be able to orientate to this light, because they will simply be enlightened through grace and the power of the Holy Spirit. Of course, this is a difficult phenomenon. She's not asking people to understand this. She's asking people to accept it as a beautiful promise which will increasingly become very concrete and real and visible. But she's saying to people at the moment that if they're not understanding that she is offering a basic preparation which is very precise and ordered for this pattern of life which she is proposing, then they really are very far away from understanding in any kind of enlightened way. And until they begin to move in a realistic way into the pattern of life which she proposes through the Oasis message, then they really are fooling themselves and pretending. The pattern of life involves a basic order, a basic balance, a basic way of living which is very simple and geared towards being well in terms of nutrition and exercise and leisure, and a way of life which tries to let people see that they've been given much in terms of creative abilities and talents, to use these productively in terms of helping each other, giving each other an uplift, and also fulfilling themselves by doing so. Life, she says, is meant to be very happy, and so people should be enjoying life. Certainly other messages have emphasized prayer and penance and fasting. And Mary would explain that penance and fasting are simply an aspect of discipline which comes into a balanced way of living. Prayer should really be a simple understanding of life as a whole, because prayer is really a movement which is living life happily, peacefully, and absolutely centered on God. Without love and a true understanding of love, people are really not able to enter into this Oasis way of life, because Mary explains that love is the absolute criterion for entry. And once again, she would insist that this love has to be real and active, pervasive and deep and feeling, so that people are understanding that all their positive emotions, which have been dulled and distorted and thwarted by modern society, the emotions of empathy, compassion, sensitivity, and a deep, pervasive feeling for others, all all these emotions have to really begin to saturate each person in a realistic way, so that people do begin to feel. Mary explains that people have become so numb that their emotions have been drowned. And the only emotions that come to the surface, really, are the negative emotions of fear and greed and hate, anxiety, stress. So she would say to people that this oasis way of life is also really asking people to live life in an unpressurized way. A way that is simple and rhythmic, beautiful and loving. Trying to achieve always a positive approach which lets energy build. Because she says that when people are living in a positive way, working in a positive way, and moving in a positive way which is centered on God and love, then energy will build within them, and they will increasingly feel well and happy and peaceful and free. Now, much material has been offered through this Oasis message. The vision itself is a very private one in many aspects, and the private nature of the vision relates to this future protection, which will be offered very visibly and concretely as a new energy. Mary promises for this Oasis message that the people following the basic preparation in terms of the way of life which she is now proposing will be able to adapt very quickly to this new energy as it appears. She asks them not to speculate upon it, as this really is a waste of energy, but to understand that if they are simply moving in the way that she asks at present, with the details that she's given through this Oasis message, and which are absolutely available to people through written material and audio material, and which will now begin to further the development with the project scheme, which we will discuss in the next session, then these people will be preparing themselves very realistically for the supernatural help, which will come at the appointed time to move them in a very realistic way into a protected development of life, which will be able to provide environments with a safety and an uplifted development which will move them beyond the physical world, upheaval, into a new sphere. Mary promises that this will be done, and will be able to be done in a normal as well as a supranormal way for those people who are enlightened into it. And they will be able to accept it quite easily and peacefully and happily. So I would say to you tonight, please try to understand that this Oasis message and this Oasis way of life is a very beautiful one, a very hopeful and promising one, and if you can begin to work with it, Mary promises that you really will begin to find yourself and find that life is shaping itself in a much more peaceful way. You will also find that life is assuming for you a meaning which is very true, because Mary insists that this way of life of the Oasis, this protected way of life, is the way of life which God has finally promised to organize into a beautiful sphere which will complete life on earth in perfect happiness. So she would ask you to accept this way as the true way, move with it if you can, and know that she is with you and God is with you in an increasingly powerful way.